Hello, you guys. It's Miss Arneson, and I want to talk to you about paint for a second. So, in this class, we're moving beyond just using pencils, and we're going to start using some paints, watercolor specifically. We're using watercolor because I can send it home with you. I haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to send home acrylic paint with you guys. So, until I figure that out, we're gonna use watercolor, which is my favorite anyway, so it's pretty cool. The history of painting is kind of hard to track down because we don't really have good written records from ancient times and even before that, like prehistoric times, before anybody was writing anything down. But we do find evidence in some caves around the world of paint being as old as like 70,000 or even 100,000 years old. That's a really, really long time. Humans don't really think in that amount of time because we only live for like 100 years each. I mean, maximum, right? Like you're lucky to get to 100, but these are much, much, much older than that. But it seems like humans started to create art as soon as they had a little extra time beyond survival to do it. So this particular image that is shown on your screen is the oldest or one of the oldest dated paintings. It's just shy of 50,000 years old. It's in a cave in Indonesia. The other evidence we have that painting is older than that is that we can see like where humans appear to have been making paint, but we don't have the paintings they painted. So it seems like we were painting before that, but as far as the evidence goes, we don't have a painting to look at older than that. Okay, let's go on. What is paint? So I put a definition here for you guys from the interwebs. You don't need to write this down, but it's basically a colored substance that you can spread over a surface and it will dry. You can make your own paint. One time I had a student that was doing a project and she waited till the very last minute and she needed to paint it. So she told her mom and her mom was like, well, we don't have any paint. So they had food coloring at home and they actually made this kind of paint right here, this one with salt, flour, and water. So you can make your own paint, but historically, of course, people didn't have like a whole bunch of extra salt and flour sitting around. So instead, what was done for a lot of human history is you take something that you find in the natural world and then you crush it up and then you mix it with like water. Water is a lot of times what they mixed it with, or oils. But of course, you don't want to waste oils in the olden days because like you want to have those calories. Olden days, I mean like prehistory. So this is charcoal, and you've probably discovered in your life that if you pick up a piece of charcoal and you like smear it on concrete, it makes a line. So we've had things to make art for a really long time. This is a rock called um, lapis lazuli, and it's blue and it's beautiful and it's one of my favorite rocks. And if you crush it up into a powder, it looks like this, and then you can mix it with things, and it will be this beautiful blue color. So people have found things in the natural world, mixed it with water, mixed it with whatever was available, sap a lot of times, like from trees, and then they can smear it on something and make an image. There's two major parts of paint. So there's a lot of other stuff going on in paint if you really get down to the details, but for our purposes, there's two important parts of paint. The first part is the pigment and the second part is the binder. The pigment is what the color is actually made of. So like this one, in case I mean, I'm sure you heard that horrible screeching. That is what happens if you don't turn the alarm off before you open one of the doors in the morning. So, anyways, the pigment is this powdery stuff. You can make pigment from all sorts of things. We make all sorts of artificial pigments now, so like we make them in the science lab. Blue used to be like one of the most expensive colors because it's like the hardest to come by, but now we can have like all sorts of blues that we just make in the lab. Cool science note about paint is that most paint colors, well, not most, but historically most paint colors come from combining different elements together. So you can find like cadmium yellow, cadmium orange, cobalt blue. Those are elements, and we can make them into different colors for paint. So as a science teacher, I just have to throw that in because it's super cool and interesting. Here's some examples of some pig or binders. So these are all oil based, so none of these would mix with water. But a lot of the pigments that or the binders that we use in modern times they're called acrylic or polymer binders. We'll talk about those on the last slide of this lesson. Watercolor is a pretty old kind of paint because all you have to do for your binder is have water. Watercolor is my favorite medium because I just love how it looks. I just love it. It's kind of blocky a little bit, but you can get some cool details in it. This is a painting by Winslow Homer. It shows some of the things about watercolor that are important. So when you do watercolor, it's kind of the opposite of most paints because most paints are going to be opaque, which means you can't see through them. So if you want the color to be lighter, then you have to mix it with more white. So if you want to tint it, then you just keep adding white until it becomes the color you want. With watercolor, it's kind of the opposite. You're going to put less paint if you want it to be more white because the paper is the whiteness. And so you start like with these clouds, you probably put a wash of like the lightest color of blue that's on here, and then you keep layering more and more layers of paint to get these darker tones over here. So that's opposite of what you do with other paints, and that's why it's a little bit confusing to start with watercolor. I would like to start with acrylic, but that's just not going to work for us during the COVID pandemic. Okay, move on. Okay, tempera paint. Tempera paint cracks me up because it's mixed with egg yolk. And if you've ever had an egg yolk, it dries so fast, and I do not understand how people were able to paint like cool things while moving so fast with their egg-based paint. Tempera can still be made out of eggs. So if you have an egg allergy, you need to read the ingredients. This is a cool painting. It's mixed media, so it has tempera paint, but it also has gold leaf. So this gold color, that's not a paint, that's actually really, really thin sheets of gold that have been pressed onto this wood. So that's a cool art technique that we're not going to do because I'm not going to give you any thin sheets of gold. Okay, so oil painting. So these are kind of in chronological order. So watercolor, like if you have pigment and you have water, you can make this. Okay, then tempera paint would come along later, and finally we get to this oil paint. Oil paint is like the creme de la creme of paints. It is amazing. You can use it really thick and make it like sit off the page so it's really, really thick. That's called impasto. There's another picture that I'll show you that has that. You can make it really super thin layers. So you can take a brush that only has one hair on it, like literally one hair on your paintbrush, and make like the finest little crazy detailed lines. So it's a really awesome paint, but there are some downsides of it. It smells bad, and it's also really hard to clean up, and in some cases it's like poisonous. So we don't really use oil paint in school. Maybe if there's an advanced art someday I'll integrate oil paint, but I don't even have oil paint at my house because it does require a lot of skill to do it, and I just don't even personally feel that I'm at that level. If you go to college, then you're going to take art classes in college, you're definitely going to use oil paint. The other downside of oil paint is that it's really expensive because the paint itself costs a lot of money, but then you also have to clean your brushes with solvent, and so you need like this basically horrible smelling stuff that dissolves the oil in your paint, and so it's a big mess. So this is a really famous painting, and I mean, even if you think these people look weird because they live in a different time than you and have different fashion styles, you can tell that this is a really detailed painting. This is a little mirror in the background, and you can actually, if you see this in person, you can see the dude who painted this picture painted himself painting the picture, so that's kind of fun. But oil paints are the creme de la creme. Like they are what, like your goal as an artist, you want to eventually get to that level because they allow you to do a lot of awesome stuff that other paints really don't. Tempera dries so fast that you have to like paint really quickly. Oil paints, they will not dry nearly as fast. In fact, sometimes they take like forever to dry, but that means that you can move your paint around for a really long time and get it exactly how you want it to be. You're not stuck with it the first way you apply it. So remember I told you that some paint kind of sticks off the canvas? That is what this paint is doing right now. So that's why it looks like it's like 3D a little bit, because it is a little bit 3D. And this is the final type of paint that we're going to talk about. I should note there's a lot of other types of paint. Like if you look at all the different cultures around the world, there are a lot, but these are the main ones that you would find like in a craft store. So that's why I'm going over these ones instead of everything. So this is a painting that I found on Etsy. It's really hard to find artists, great works of art being done with acrylic painting, because acrylic painting, I mean, this is kind of a pessimistic view of it, but this is my art opinion, okay, my professional art opinion, is that acrylic paint is trying to be oil paint, but it's not. So it does some of the things that oil paints do, like it doesn't dry as fast as a tempera paint. You can make the thick layers of paint depending on the body of the acrylic that you're using. You can mix the colors really easily. But at the same time, like it's just not the same. Like you can't do what you can do with oil paints with acrylic to a full extent. One thing about the binder, so the binder of oil paint is oil, that's why it's called oil painting. The binder of acrylic paint is going to be polymers. So these are all lab created things. So this paint only came around into use recently, like since the 1940s. So there hasn't been like a lot of time for the artists that have been using this to get like super famous either, because a lot of times good art has to stand the test of time. So if it was invented not even 100 years ago, then it's hard to see which artists that were using this medium will stand the test of time for a long time. But we're going to use acrylic paint in class because it is not as expensive as oil paint, and it's kind of like oil paint, and it's very easy to clean up. You can usually rinse out your brush in just water and get it nice and clean. So those are some pieces of information about paint, and I hope you have a good day. Bye.